On August 27th, 2006, on a bright and sunny day in southwest Colorado while riding motorcycles with friends, I would miscalculate my strategy to navigate the mountainous roadway, and my life would change in a single moment. From the point of impact on a 900-pound motorcycle at 55 miles per hour, I would beautifully execute a 78 feet, no hands, non-purposeful cartwheel. And I would come to rest perpendicular with the guardrail over the bridge on the Dolores River. My left arm was severed to the bone and torn down to my elbow, nearly amputated. My right hand and my right wrist were crushed and broken. And I had a punch-through avulsion in my right forearm. Now that's a fancy language for it's a big gaping hole. I was bleeding severely from both of my arms from the trauma that I had incurred. And at that moment, my blood was flowing. My brain was flooding with dopamine, epinephrine, norepinephrine, and cortisol, and I was bleeding profusely. I was in a drift, and I needed something to manage it. The clock was ticking, but on this side of heaven, isn't it always? Life and everything in it is basically a compilation of files. All right? Files that make us who we are. The files include work, family, career, technology, the good times and the bad times. And because we operate from interior and the confines of these files, we suffer what I want you to know as the drift. Remember I mentioned laying on the highway that day, I was in a drift and I needed something to manage it. When you understand the profound meaning of escaping the drift or operating outside the confine of the files that you create for yourself, you will have a transformation of heart, of mind, and of ways. Which leads us to this. To understand the algorithm effect, is best to understand the define of algorithm. An algorithm is a process or set of rules to be followed in calculations or other problem-solving operations, especially by a computer. Now, it just so happens that we happen to have one sitting right on top of our shoulders with a super information highway, ears, eyes, nose, and a mouth that take in critical cues and bits of data and information. And what we do with that data is critical, because it's important to know what we're going to do with that data to escape the drift. And that leads us to the profound understanding of the algorithm effect, because the algorithm effect will catalyze when, which is what's important now. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Life consists of what a man is thinking all day long." Henry Ford said, "If you are thinking that you can, you're right. And if you're thinking that you can't, you're right." And that leads us to the algorithm effect and escaping the drift. Now, what does that mean? Well, at that moment while laying on the highway that day, I had to come up with a strategic plan to escape my drift. And that led me to assessment, right? So once I realized how badly I was injured, I had to calculate with intentional purpose, not left to chance, intentional purpose, which would be critical thinking, to navigate to the next position on the algorithm. Now, remember, the critical piece that I mentioned is what's important now. It's the catalyst piece that you cannot neglect to notice, because it basically fuels every particular position that you navigate or leverage as you navigate your algorithm. Now, your algorithm may be very different than mine, right? So the files that make me who I am, I operate from within, escape the drift, create an algorithm, and execute. You must do the same. And when you do, you will fuel not ordinary thinking, but extraordinary thinking. You will fuel not ordinary actions, but extraordinary actions. And then lastly, you will not fuel ordinary results, you will fuel extraordinary results. Now, I must warn you You have to be prepared for the unexpected. After a long transport by ground to a rural hospital in Cortez, Colorado, that's a long ways away from the scene where the crash happened, they came to realize that they couldn't manage me there. And they made the executive decision to transport me to a level 1 trauma center. Once there, I realized that I still had my pants on. Now, having been a paramedic for nearly 20 years at that point, I found that really surprising, because usually you're naked by then. But that paled compared to the next surprise, because my algorithm, which was going quite nicely at that point, was making a traverse to basically what I thought would be a conclusive positive end, took a left turn. Because at that moment, I had to disclose that I forgot my riding gear in Wichita, and that I went to a local Walmart to secure some long johns. Well, I came to learn that in the month of August, there are no long johns in anyone's inventory, right? And if you've not ever ridden a motorcycle, or if you do ride a motorcycle, you know that it doesn't take much to be cold, and especially when you're riding in the mountains. But it was at that moment that my algorithm took a left from its natural trajectory, because I now had panic in the box. Because it was at that moment that I had to disclose to the doctor, there were no long johns at Walmart. And so, doctor, when you take my pantyhose off, just stick them in my boots. Right? Now, you have to know, in the hubbub of a trauma room, when there's a hustle bustle and all of the things that play out in the seriousness and the environment of a trauma room, they burst out in laughter. And that was a capital LOL. And I was okay with that. And it was the next moment that I had to disclose that took my trajectory to a different place. The doctor casually leaned over me and he said, "Scott, how did you know what size to buy?" And I proudly and boldly proclaimed, "Doc, there is a chart on the box." Right? Chart on box. All right? So that gets us back to what's important now. So as you chart your course and as you make plans for navigating your algorithm, you will escape the drift and you will come to a profound understanding of what it is to produce extraordinary thinking, extraordinary actions, and extraordinary results. It's entirely possible. And if you were to consider what it transforms you to, it basically allows you to get to the axis of realities and possibilities. Now, that day on the highway, when I was on the reality axis, most people, myself included, navigate between business as usual and crisis. And because we remain in the drift most of the time, we stay on that side of the axis. It's not until we seek the change that we desire that we go from the low side of the axis on possibilities to thinking the unthinkable, and then it's a hop, skip, jump to transcend to extraordinary results. Does that make sense? So again, get away from the axis of realities, get to the axis of possibilities, and transcend to thinking the unthinkable and achieving extraordinary results. Now, for me that day, I survived, and I lived to tell the tale to be able to stand before you today and tell you my story. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you understand the algorithm effect, you will understand and be able to transcend the possibilities and the mentality and the actionable outcomes of intentional, purposeful thinking. And that's different than just leaving life up to chance, right? Because most people on most days, I would challenge you to say, you're on autopilot. And I would challenge you to turn off the autopilot and fly the plane. When was the last time that something truly remarkable happened to you? When was the last time that you affected that remarkable thing to happen? Ladies and gentlemen, it's possible. So today, as the theme goes, for the talks and all of the speakers that you've heard today, if you were to create a new algorithm and you were to look at the mantra of Friends University, faith, friends, future, forgive my writing, you have the ability to navigate a new algorithm and take it anywhere you want to go. And you can rise above the drift, remember? I said, get above the drift, which is a compilation of your files that make you who you are. Get outside of the confine of those files so that you ultimately inject the catalyst, what's important now, and take your algorithm to extraordinary results. Ladies and gentlemen, the algorithm effect can change your life. It saved mine.